Hey guys, Stas here with another video on behalf of Beer Co. A couple of weeks ago, I was sent this from Beer Co. They said, have a look at it, let me know what you think. Now this is the new, well, it's not that new anymore, but it's the new version 2 of the Tilt wireless hydrometer and thermometer. Let's take a look. Box was a little bit beaten up in shipping because I've got grains and a couple of other things, but it's okay, don't worry. So inside the box, you get the tilt itself and a little starter's guide. So it's just basically, basic instructions. There's not that many instructions. They do have the menu available on the website, I believe. There is an app as well. So you get a little protective case to keep it in, and the tilt hydrometer itself is in this plastic polycarbonate protective casing. The plastic case protects it from obviously getting short-circuited when you drop it into the beer, and also provides a nice smooth area which is easy to sanitize. So you can take it apart. It's got a little silicone gasket here, and take out the little sled and replace the battery, which they say lasts about 6 months to a year, depending on how often you brew. It's got a nice little feature where when you put it horizontally on the desk, I don't think I'm going to hold it still enough, it goes to sleep. When you hold it horizontally, like in a drawer, it goes to sleep. And when you move it about, there's a little light just here, you probably can't see it, which when you first pick it up, it blinks green 3 times to let you know that you are okay to use it for another brew. And there's a couple of other signals that it has if it's saying maybe you should think about changing the battery sometime soon. And if it blinks red, of course, it says no, you've got no battery. And to know that it's asleep, when you put it down on the desk and it's still, the LED flashes twice blue to let you know that it's going to sleep. So there's a couple of really simple things to let you know that the device is all operational, because there's no screen or anything on this, because this goes in your beer. And you connect it with a smartphone, tablet, or you can even hook up a Raspberry Pi with Tilt Pi loaded on there, so it can log your stuff to the internet. So using the tilt hydrometer, when you pair it to a smart device, I just use my old mobile phone. You need to calibrate this just like any sort of measuring hardware that you have. You put it in a bowl of distilled water or brewing water that you're using to brew with, and you just sit this so it can float freely, and then you calibrate that to the 1.000 specific gravity reading that you should get from that. You can also have multiple calibration points, so you could mix up a solution with sugar and water, measure that with a hydrometer that you trust, or if you can work it out based on weight to be a specific gravity, you can put this in and then set that calibration point through the app. One trouble I ran into is that you do have to calibrate this with the device that you're going to be logging it with, because the calibration is for the device reading the tilt hydrometer, not the tilt hydrometer itself. That was one thing I was caught out with. So once you've calibrated it, you make sure you sanitize it. Just pop it in your sanitizer, Star San, whatever you use. Pop this in there and leave it there for 2 minutes. And then you take it out, put it in your beer, and that's when you can start up your app on your smartphone or tablet or Tilt Pi and start your logging. Now you give the beer a name in the software, and then if you put in your email address, you will get sent a link to a Google Sheets where the data from this starts to be logged. Now I'll give you a look at the data that I was sent for my first brew. This beer is called the Vacant Gesture. I wanted to brew this beer, and it was the perfect time to give the tilt a test. So the data you get in here, it started out at the very bottom. You can see we started out at 1035 or 1.035, which then sort of leveled out about 20 minutes later to 1036 or 1.036, and it was at about 19.5 degrees. And then you can see I've added some comments on the right hand side. That was just so I knew what was going on, and I wanted to test out how those notes came through. You can see the fermentation progressed all the way down to 0.999, and then finally settled out at 0.001. When I did test that against my hydrometer sample, it was out by a little bit. My hydrometer sample was 1.006, but I think that was actually down to my error in calibration that I did, because I didn't really have enough time to learn how to do it properly. I was just eager to get it in. So anyway, I threw it in, and that's what I got. On the left-hand side of the sheet, you'll see stats based on your gravity, your temperature, and the calculations on your apparent attenuation, and of course ABV. The bottom three cells there, I've just put in myself, so I knew what my expected attenuation was going to be, just so that I could track it a little bit easier. Yeah, it also plots it in a nice to look at chart. Here you can see the same data but plotted in a graph. The blue is gravity and the red is temperature. And this just allows you to track your progress of the fermentation, which I found really useful. So you might be thinking, well, that's cool and all, but how does that help you make better beer? Well, knowing where you are in fermentation, there's a couple of ways that I found it really useful. I often dry hop my beers, my IPAs and pale ales right in the last couple of points of fermentation. I find I get better hop utilization, more flavor and more aroma. So I like to see where that curve is, where it's starting to slow down and I'm getting to the last maybe 2 or 3 points. That's when I like to dry hop, and having the data available to me so I can check it without pulling out a gravity sample. I find it really reassuring to know where it's at, because remember, airlock activity isn't necessarily a sign of the rate of fermentation. It can be a good indicator, but if you have a leak, you may not have airlock activity even when there's active fermentation still happening. So use it for timing dry hops. Also, you can use it to time fermentation related temperature raises. Maybe you're doing a lager, or you want to try and speed up a fermentation of a brew but not get the phenols and the esters from the yeast from going too hot. What a lot of people starting to do is, after 50 to 65, 70% of the way through fermentation, so attenuation of 50 to 70%, you start increasing the temperature of that fermentation gradually, maximum about 1.5 to 2 degrees per day, until you're at essentially a diacetyl rest, and that can prevent against stalled fermentation, early yeast flocculation, that sort of stuff. So, and also decreases the amount of time that the beer is in the fermenter. So if you really need to pump through a couple of brews for a party, or maybe you're just out of beer at home and you really want to punch through a couple of beers so that you can have delicious homebrew on tap again, you can do that to shave a couple of days off your ferment time. So that's how I use it. But I think if any homebrewer is looking to dial in their recipes, this can be a really useful tool without having to constantly be going out and taking hydrometer samples. I still did take hydrometer sample at the end of fermentation and at the beginning of fermentation. I like to use my sensors to taste how the beer's going. It helps if there's any yeast issues or flavour issues, or just to know how a beer progresses. I will still take some samples, and I'm not at the stage where I can trust this 100% just yet, but I think it's more of a tool that's less about the specific readings and more about the trends. So like I said, the rate of fermentation change, as it's slowing, that's when you can sort of start to utilize this data more so than taking your really precise readings from it. Although it does do that accurately as it says in the specs, I just haven't had it long enough to play with it yet. So yeah, that's been a short look at the Tilt Hydrometer. I think it's a really useful tool, and although I still take hydrometer readings, I'm definitely going to continue to use it just so I can hit those dry hop times and keep my slow temperature ramps happening. And I've actually got a wireless temperature controller on my fridge, so after I see my fermentation slowing down, I can just switch to another app, bump up my fridge by a degree, just to keep the fermentation chugging along happily. So yeah, getting a little bit techie, but I think that it's all tools that help make the brewing process fun and enjoyable. And you know, is it necessary? No, it isn't, but it's damn cool. So this has been Stats from Stats Brewing on behalf of Beer Co, with a video about the Tilt wireless hydrometer and thermometer. Until the next time, I'll see you in the next video.